The clatter of cutlery paused mid-air as he slammed his palm on the table. His voice cut through the quiet dining room like a jagged blade. Tired? From what exactly? I pay for everything while you sit all day. She forced a polite smile as her heart bruised against her ribs. The chandelier's light trembled above them, casting shadowed patterns across her careful expression. Their two children froze, eyes wide, forks forgotten. He leaned back, chest rising, the fine lines at his temples deepening. You hear me, right? You have nothing to complain about. His tone brooked no argument. She swallowed the lump of hurt lodged in her throat and lifted her chin. I only said I felt exhausted, that's all. Her voice sounded small, distant, like a bird's chirp drowned by thunder. Her husband's brow furrowed. Exhausted? You have no real responsibilities. You don't bring home the income. You choose to stay here. His words stung with practiced cruelty. In that moment, she felt as though she were dissolving into the ornate wallpaper behind her. The laughter she once knew felt forbidden now, replaced by a tight knot of shame in her stomach. Her youngest daughter's lip trembled. Mama, are you okay? Her voice was innocent, curious. She shot a grateful glance at her daughter before looking back at him. He ignored the question, pushing his chair back loudly. I'm going upstairs, he declared. Try not to collapse before I get back. With that, he stalked out, leaving the echoes of his footsteps trailing anger through the room. Silence enveloped them. The servants in the kitchen held their breath. The children exchanged anxious glances. She reached out and gently covered her daughter's small hand. I'll be fine, sweetheart. She squeezed it. Offering warmth, she struggled to feel herself. She cleared her throat and continued her meal, each bite a battle between pride and pain. After a moment, her son, old enough to sense the tension, whispered, Mom, I'm sorry he said that. She forced her lips into a reassuring curve. Don't apologize, darling. It's not your fault. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, fighting tears she refused to shed in front of them. Later, alone in the kitchen cleaning the dishes, she finally let the tears come. They fell silently into the soapy water. The echo of his outburst still resonated in her bones. Yet beneath the hurt, something ignited, an ember of defiance. If he believed she sat idle, she would show him the strength tucked inside her silence. She wiped her cheeks and drew in a trembling breath. Memories of early days flooded her mind, a time when he surprised her with sunrise coffee and whispered promises. Now, kindness had become a currency in short supply. She acknowledged the truth. She was invisible in her own home. She pressed her palm against the cool countertop and stared at a faded photograph of their wedding day. In it, she wore a simple dress, eyes alight with hope as they danced under paper lanterns. How swiftly that hope had wilted. The dishes she scrubbed seemed heavier now, not because of the weight of the plates, but the burden of unacknowledged labor. Yet in the silence, she sensed a shift. An ember of defiance glowed in her chest, a promise that her worth extended beyond the sharp edge of his words. Setting aside the last cup, she stood upright, chin lifted. Tomorrow, she resolved, she would begin to write a new chapter, one in which her voice would finally be heard, and her story fully reclaimed. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, dust motes dancing in the air as she stacked plates in the sink. He hovered behind her, arms crossed, wearing an expression thick with disdain. You call that a breakfast? He snapped, peering at the charred edges of the omelet she'd made. His words were less about the food, and more about undermining her effort. She paused, spoon in hand, and met his gaze in the reflection of the stainless steel kettle. I thought you liked eggs, she said softly. He scoffed. Not when they're burnt. You burn water, I swear. The insult landed like a pebble thrown into her chest, sending ripples of insecurity through her. She turned back to the counter, shoulders trembling. The coffee she poured gave her a moment's comfort, its warmth seeping into her palms. Later, she carried a basket of laundry to the small room at the back of the house. Each garment felt like a weight she didn't ask for. She shook out a shirt, folding it with careful precision, as his voice drifted through the open door. Don't you have anything better to do than play house? If you want something fulfilling, get a job. A distant, practiced line he used when he needed to remind her of her place. His tone grated against her nerves, but she clasped her fingers together and focused on the rhythmic fold of the fabric. Socks, shirts, towels, each fold a silent affirmation of her role. She wondered if folding her life into neat corners could somehow make it bearable. The walls around her felt like a cage, yet she moved with deliberate calm, refusing to let his words shatter her composure. In the afternoon, she waved gently at a neighbor as she mopped the tiled hallway outside her home. The neighbor, an elderly woman with kind eyes, offered a sympathetic smile. She greeted her with a quiet nod, mindful of the ears that might overhear. Every chore became a performance, flawless, silent, invisible. She ached for recognition, yet she tucked that ache away, too weary to voice it. As dusk settled, she sat on the porch, the laundry basket empty beside her. The cicadas' song filled the air, and she closed her eyes, inhaling the warm breeze. In that moment, she recognized the pattern. The insults, the constant belittling, designed to erode her confidence drop by drop. Her chest tightened, but within the pressure she felt a strange clarity. This was her life, his narrative, but not necessarily her destiny. She stood and dusted off her skirt, mind drifting back to sunlit afternoons when he cheered for her victories. Now, applause was replaced by biting words. She pressed her palm against the railing of the porch, its wood worn smooth by years of her silent presence. Inside, the ceiling fan churned through stale air as she gathered her children's drawings from the fridge. Vibrant suns and stick figures beamed at her, reminders of their love. She taped them along the hallway, a gallery of hope amid relentless criticism. Her reflection in the hallway mirror gave her pause. The woman staring back wore calm eyes, but her chest tightened with longing for change. Tomorrow, she resolved, she would enroll in evening classes at the community center to reclaim her life. She pictured her children's proud faces as she walked across campus, notebooks in hand. She would prove that her dreams had not been lost, simply deferred. With steady breaths, she embraced the promise of tomorrow. This small step felt monumental, a whisper turning into a roar within her soul. Before dawn, she crept through the house, careful not to wake her children. The silence was a canvas she painted with soft footsteps and gentle creaks. In the kitchen, she lit the stove's pilot light and prepared hot tea, its steam curling like a comforting shawl. She laid out breakfast, warm porridge, sliced bananas, a dollop of honey. Each spoonful was a silent prayer to start the day right. While the sky tinted pink, she filled the kettle and set it to boil. She rinsed produce, her hands submerged in cool water. The kitchen window, framed by lacy curtains, offered a view of the yard where dew-damp grass glistened. She inhaled the fresh air deep into her lungs, savoring the moment of peace before the world stirred. When the children awoke, she guided them through their morning rituals, combing hair, adjusting collars, packing lunchboxes. Each action was meticulous, rehearsed 1,000 times. She tied her daughter's shoelaces, without a word, brushing stray hairs from her forehead with a practiced tenderness. Her son gulped his porridge, eyes bright as she kissed his scruffy head. She cleared the table and washed dishes before the sun fully rose. In the adjacent living room, she arranged cushions and dusted shelves. Her movements were swift, efficient, as though choreographing a private ballet. No applause awaited her here, only the quiet satisfaction of tasks completed. In the mid-morning hush, she stepped into the tiny garden behind the house and watered the bougainvillea, its magenta petals open like soft confessions. She knelt in the soil, her fingers gentle as she tended each stem. The earth felt alive beneath her nails, a reminder that growth demanded patience and care. She closed her eyes, yearning to grow herself beyond these walls. By mid-morning, she swept the floor, her broom tracing graceful arcs across the tiles. Outside, a neighbor's children dashed past in school uniforms, waving as they ran. She returned their smiles, but looked away before admiration touched her lips. In the afternoon, she sorted through mail and balanced the household ledger. Every expense, from school fees to grocery staples, found its place in neat columns. She recorded each entry with unwavering focus, a ledger that mapped her invisible contributions to the family stability. In the late afternoon, laundry spun in the machines while she pressed clothes, smoothing out wrinkles as if smoothing the edges of her own frayed nerves. She hummed a lullaby under her breath, an old tune her mother sang. It was the only piece of music she allowed herself, a private gift amid routine solitude. As dusk fell, she paused at the doorway to the empty house, listening to the creaking boards under her feet. The quiet pressed against her chest, yet within that hush she sensed her own heartbeat. Her phone vibrated, a friend inviting her to a weekend workshop on business skills. She hesitated, recalling his warnings against stepping out, but determination swelled inside her, and she tapped yes. After tucking her children into bed, she sat alone at the kitchen table. Shadows danced against the walls as she imagined a future where her mornings held familiar rituals and her afternoons belonged to her ambitions, selling handmade crafts or tutoring children in art, opportunities she had long buried under duty. She could no longer be caretaker and invisible specter without fading away. She closed her eyes and whispered to the darkness, "I am here." In that moment, the walls ceased to be barriers. They felt like thresholds, doors she would soon open to the world beyond her quiet life. Change was truly inevitable. The front door clicked shut behind her as she returned from errands, plastic bags heavy with groceries. He stepped from the study, arms folded, brow tight. "How much did you spend?" he demanded, voice low. She paused in the hallway, items shifting in the bags. 3,000 naira, she answered, trying to keep her tone steady. His nostrils flared. 500 naira on snacks? Explain. She opened a bag and weighed each item on a small kitchen scale. 2 packs of sugar, a loaf of bread, her voice trailed off. After he walked away, she stacked the plastic containers onto the countertop and sank onto a stool. The kitchen felt smaller, like a cage. Even the knives in their magnetic strip loomed like silent sentinels judging every move. She thought of her childhood home, where money was scarce but laughter abundant. Here, abundance had a price, suspicion. The phone rang, a neighbor probably reminding her of the community meeting. She hesitated before answering. "Hello." No one spoke. Then clicks. She hung up, heart thudding. The neighbor had dialed back. This had become their routine. She calling, messages left unanswered. She folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket, anger simmering beneath frustration. She retreated to the living room, sank into the sofa, and glanced at the stack of unopened bills on the coffee table. Electricity, water, children's school fees. Each one chipped at whatever calm she'd managed to salvage. She reached for a pen and jotted an expense chart in a tattered notebook. Each entry reaffirmed her invisible role as the household's accountant, but offered no recognition for her efforts. Afternoon sunlight filtered through tinted curtains as she dusted the bookshelf. She paused at a framed photograph. Her and her college friends on graduation day, arms around each other, wide smiles chasing the horizon of possibilities. She remembered the promise of sisterhood that time held, but as the light shifted, she realized she hadn't spoken to any of them in over 2 years. At night, she leaned over the kitchen sink, listening to the faucet's drip echo through the silent hallway. It struck her how even shadows seemed to judge her. She sank onto the dining chair, head bowed. Outside, the night breeze rustled the curtains. She opened her wallet. A single note folded neatly, remainder of the household allowance he grudgingly gave. It felt like charity, not partnership. She fingered the note as if it held answers. She called her sister, then her childhood friend. No one answered. Each unanswered attempt felt like a fracture in her sense of belonging, but she refused to break. Closing her eyes, she inhaled deeply, recalling advice from her mother. Roots may bind, but wings let you fly. Tomorrow, she would open a savings account in her name and enroll in art classes. Step by step, she would rebuild her life beyond these walls. Her reflection in the hallway mirror caught her eye. Weary but unbroken, she nodded to herself, a silent pact sealed in the hush of her isolated world. She rose, resolve steady in her chest, ready to breach the walls that held her captive at last. The argument had started over something trivial. He accused her of hiding expenses again, his voice rising in the midnight hush. "Don't think I don't know about that extra phone bill," he said, his words sharp as broken glass. She stood in the hallway, the orphan phone bill clutched in her hand like a guilty confession. "I only called Amma to check on her surgery," she replied quietly. He scoffed, tossing the paperwork onto the floor. "Your secrets are pathetic excuses." She watched him stride past her into the bedroom, the door clicking shut behind him. Back in the living room, the ticking clock felt louder than his outburst. Her heart should have clenched. Tears should have stung her eyes. But nothing came. Her throat felt dry as dust, emotions as distant as stars in the night sky. She sank onto the sofa, the cushions cold against her legs. The television flickered, silent in sleep mode. She glanced down at her hands resting in her lap, skin stretched over bone, veins mapping roads she no longer recognized. A lifetime of suppressed grief and fear had calcified into numbness. Soft footsteps approached. Her daughter tiptoed into the room, eyes red from sleep. "Mama," she whispered, "are you okay?" The single word, fragile as a butterfly's wing, landed in her chest and cracked the hardened shell. She looked at her daughter's small face, trust shining despite the darkness. She wanted to cry, to let the tears flow freely, to feel release, but the well had run dry. She reached over and drew her daughter into her arms. The child's head rested against her shoulder, warm and real. She pressed a kiss onto her hair and closed her eyes, surrendering for a moment to the gentle rise and fall of her chest. In that embrace, feelings stirred, comfort, protection, love. Yet they mingled with emptiness, a hollowness she couldn't fill. When she finally laid her daughter down and tucked the blanket around her, she lingered at the doorway. The night air was cool and heavy. No moonlight entered through the drawn curtains. The room was an inky void. She inhaled the darkness as though it were a living thing, waiting to swallow regrets. She walked to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, and drank slowly. The liquid slid down, but it did not quench the drought inside her. Still, she didn't cry. Her eyes remained dry, expression calm. And in the quiet, she understood. The tears had vanished because her spirit had retreated into itself, shielded by a shell of survival. She closed her eyes and let the journal rest. Moonlight filtered through the curtains as she replayed the evening's harsh words. In that silver glow, she understood that the nights of suffering had to end. Rising, she walked to the shelf where an easel stood. She ran her fingers along its wooden frame, recalling the joy of brushstrokes on canvas. A plan formed. Tomorrow, she would claim time for herself again, to paint the emotions she could no longer release through tears. She imagined creating something raw and honest, a testament to her journey through pain and toward renewal. The act of creation felt like an antidote to numbness, the promise of tears turned into pigment. She paused by her daughter's bedroom door, watching her chest rise with breaths. The quiet resolve in that moment felt stronger than any sob. She pressed a hand to her heart and whispered, "I will feel again." Then, for the first time, she allowed a single tear to trace a path down her cheek. Before dawn's first light, she slipped from the bedroom, careful not to wake the children. Every creak of the floorboard beneath her bare feet felt amplified in the stillness. In the kitchen, the kettle's gentle whistle announced boiling water. She poured tea into 2 mugs, her hands trembling with anticipation. She found him at the counter when she entered, shoulders hunched over his phone. He set it aside and rubbed his eyes, as though sleep had betrayed him. "I'm leaving soon," he murmured. She closed the distance, placing a mug in front of him. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice soft as a prayer. "I need you. I need support, someone to listen." He took a sip and sneered. "Support? You mean another lecture on your feelings?" He tilted the mug toward her. "You have no idea what real work is." The kitchen's fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on their fractured morning. Her chest tightened. She pressed her palm to the cool countertop and forced herself to speak. "It's not a lecture. It's partnership. I cook, clean, care for the children. I deserve emotional support." Each word was a stitch in a torn fabric of her self-worth. He laughed, sharp and hollow. "Emotional support? That's my job. If you want support, get a job outside this house. Earn your keep." He crossed his arms, as imposing as a judge delivering a verdict. His eyes showed no doubt, no compassion. She felt tears, well, but blinked them back. "This family is ours," she said, voice stronger. "We made vows. Our home is built on mutual trust." The words trembled, but she clung to them. He shoved back from the counter. "Vows? I didn't vow to become your counselor." His tone was mocking. "This is my money. My rules." He swept his hand toward the hallway, indicating the entire house. "If you're unhappy, leave." The silence that followed was heavier than any shouted insult. She inhaled, bitter taste of tears on her tongue. Her mind flashed to wedding photos, her radiant smile as she accepted his hand. Where had that warmth gone? She squared her shoulders, every muscle taut with resolve. "If you think so little of me, maybe I should leave." Her voice held firm even as fear flitted in her chest. "Do it," he snarled. "Tonight. Pack your bags." He turned and walked away, footsteps echoing down the corridor. She closed her eyes, hands resting on the countertop. A dull ache bloomed behind her ribs, a mixture of heartbreak and fierce determination. This moment, painful as it was, had cracked the final barrier. His indifference had set her free. She stepped onto the porch, the morning air crisp on her skin. She inhaled, tasting freedom. A neighbor waved from across the street. She returned the smile calmly. She felt the world as ally, not enemy. Then she looked back at the front door, its frame a memory of confinement and the promise of a new beginning. She gathered her composure and cleaned the cups deliberately. Each rinse felt like washing away fragments of doubt. When the children stirred, she would greet them with calm resolve. Later, as she dressed for the day, she imagined a new routine. Classes at the community center, building skills and friendships. For the first time, her future felt unscripted, terrifying yet hopeful. By midday, she had decided she would leave only on her terms. This final argument had ended not with defeat, but with empowerment. Dawn broke fully outside, painting her kitchen in warm light. Inside, her world had shifted forever. That night, the headlights from passing cars cast shifting patterns across the living room wall. She sat on the sofa, clutching a small bag she'd packed over weeks, an old purse, a change of clothes, her favorite scarf. The weight of its contents felt heavier than its size. She heard his footsteps in the hallway before he appeared, his silhouette framed by the open door. "Are you leaving yet?" he asked, voice neutral as if she were an unwelcome guest. His gaze swept from her face to the bag in her lap. I will," she replied softly. "When I'm ready." Her voice was firm despite the tremor beneath. He closed the door behind him. "Don't pretend this is your home. I've told you before. Pack up and go. You've contributed nothing. This house is mine." His words were cold, stripped of any flicker of regret. Despite the harshness, there was an undercurrent of relief in his tone, as though her departure lifted a burden from him. She rose slowly, cradling the bag close. "This house was ours," she said, voice clear. "But if you want it back, take it. I have no wish to stay." She paused by the staircase, where her daughter's tiny shoes still sat, neatly paired. A pang of sadness hit her. Those shoes symbolized morning rituals and bedtime stories. Yet she knew she carried their love within her, no matter the distance between walls. His lips curled into a scornful smile. "Good. Tonight." He walked toward the study, footsteps fading. In the quiet that followed, she felt the house exhale collective relief, its walls no longer harboring hidden arguments. She crossed to the foyer, where the coat rack loomed with jackets she'd hung weeks ago, out of convenience. She slipped on the scarf, its emerald green a bold rebellion against his gray world, and picked up the bag. Each movement was deliberate, an act of reclaiming agency. As she reached the front door, her mind replayed years of caretaking, waking early to prepare meals, soothing fevers, mending torn uniforms. She had given everything she had, yet her labor went unseen. Here, in this moment, she became visible again, each step a declaration of self-worth. The doorknob felt cool beneath her fingers. She glanced back at the dimly lit living room, the plush couch now emptied of her presence. A tear threatened, but she blinked it away. She refused to leave marked by sorrow. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and pressed the door open. The night air greeted her, a gentle breeze, carrying distant city sounds and the promise of possibility. She stepped onto the porch and inhaled, tasting freedom. The streetlights painted the sidewalk in golden arcs. She looked down at her bag and then upward at the sky, where stars flickered like distant lanterns guiding her path. With her first step onto the pavement, she carried a fragile triumph. She was homeless by his decree, but she was no longer heartless. Her hand still quivered, but inside her chest, warmth blossomed, the fire of independence. Across the street, a neighbor's window light blinked. She imagined walking there, finding refuge. She imagined mornings without reprimands, afternoons spent on her own terms. She imagined emotional freedom. Behind her, the door clicked shut. It felt more like a seal of closure than a lock. She lingered a moment, allowing the finality to sink in. Then she turned away from the house she had lost and began the journey toward the life she would build. One step, one heartbeat, one promise at a time. Dawn broke gray over unfamiliar rooftops as she sat on the edge of her cousin's couch, her small bag at her feet. The room was spare, a narrow bed, a chipped nightstand, a window overlooking a dusty courtyard. She inhaled the bland scent of fabric, her eyes tracing the crack in the ceiling. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled the scarf closer around her shoulders. She felt small yet determined. She reached into her purse and found a single 5,000 naira note folded twice. It felt insubstantial, like a breath held too long. Everything else, the bank account, the credit cards, the utility bills, remained under his name. He had cut her off entirely. This cousin's kindness felt like both salvation and reminder. She had nowhere else to go. Her phone's battery flickered on the screen. No messages. The previous night's shock still reverberated in her limbs. Her heart pounded in her ears, as if echoing the emptiness of her finances. She closed her eyes and pressed her temple, willing the dizziness to subside. Footsteps approached in the hallway. Her cousin, Ada, entered with a glass of water and 2 boiled eggs. "Here," she said softly, handing over the plate. "Eat something." A warm smile accompanied the words. Ada's presence felt like sunlight cutting through storm clouds. She accepted the food and forced herself to take a bite. Each chew reminded her how long it had been since nourishment felt effortless. Ada poured tea into a chipped mug and sat beside her. "You're safe here," she said, voice gentle. "Rest." But rest was a stranger. The roots of anxiety had grown long and reached deep. She pushed the plate aside and stood. "I can't stay in your way," she murmured. Ada reached for her hand. "Your family. This house is yours whenever you need it." Tears brimmed, but she turned her gaze toward the window. The courtyard below bustled with market vendors setting up stalls. Life moved on, indifferent to her plight. She envied their purpose, their routines. She missed the comforting repetition of her own home's morning rituals. She retrieved her bag and sat cross-legged on the couch, laying out its contents. 2 dresses, a pair of flats, a toothbrush, a small journal. The journal's pages were blank, patiently awaiting her emotions. Her fingers brushed the cover, feeling its potential. She stood and moved to the window. A gentle breeze sifted through the open pane. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her, imagining it carrying away fear. Behind closed lids, memories flickered. Her husband's laughter at her jokes, her daughter's bedtime stories. Now those memories felt fragile and distant. She opened her eyes and faced the room. She was alone, but not defeated. She sat at the small desk, extracted the journal, and wrote, "Day 1. I am here." Her handwriting trembled, but held fast. She paused and wrote again, "I will rebuild." She placed the pen down and looked at the paper. Her resolve felt real, tinged with the tremor of uncertainty. She leaned back, letting the chair's support remind her that she had friends, a cousin, and a story not yet finished. As dusk approached, she braced herself for the night. She would sleep on this couch, her bag as pillow, her scarf as blanket. It was humble and raw, nothing like home, but it represented choice. Before closing her eyes, she whispered to the empty room, "I will survive." The darkness answered with silence, but beneath it, She felt the first stirrings of strength. Night fell like a curtain as she lay on the thin mattress atop her cousin's couch. The city's hum muted behind walls. She stared at the ceiling, tracing shadows cast by streetlights beyond the curtains. Despite the tightness in her chest, a steady calm enveloped her. No shouts, no cold glares, only silence inviting introspection. She listened to her own breath, each inhale reminding her she was still alive. She had left the house that felt like prison. Now this borrowed room offered refuge, however humble. She closed her eyes, but sleep evaded her. Instead, razor-sharp thoughts raced. Was she wrong to hope? Could she truly rebuild? She sat up and wrapped her arms around her knees, scarf trailing off her shoulders like a lifeline. The window beside her framed the night sky, dotted with distant stars that seemed to whisper promises. She touched the fabric of the scarf, feeling the softness that tied her to both past and future. Sleep finally drifted in hours later, heavy and fragmented. In dreams, she moved through her old home, picking up ghosts of arguments and tears. He stood at the threshold, arms crossed. "Why are you here?" he asked. She lifted her chin. "Because I belong where I'm valued." His face distorted, then melted into void. She woke with heart pounding, sweat cooling on her skin. Dawn's first light seeped through the curtains, pale and wavering. She blinked, disoriented. For a moment, she fought the memory of her old life. Then it returned, the cold dismissal, his command to leave. She exhaled, as though exorcising fear. She had survived night. She rose from the couch, legs stiff. She moved to the small desk and looked at the journal entry from yesterday. "I will rebuild." She added a new line. "I survived my first night alone. I am stronger." Each letter was an affirmation, a heartbeat turned to ink. She drank cold water from a glass beside the bed and savored its clarity. It tasted like possibility. She dressed in the simple dress she had chosen, comfortable, unassuming. She fingered the fabric, aware of how something so modest could feel like armor. Downstairs, Ada was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, fried plantain, eggs, and leftover stew. The aroma drifted upstairs, beckoning. She descended the stairs, mindful of her bare feet, on creaking wood. Ada smiled and poured her tea. "You look rested," she said. Her voice was warm but cautious. "I slept," she replied simply, "and dreamed." She let the silence hang for a moment. "I dreamed I was free." Ada's eyes glistened. "Dreams can become plans," she said. They ate in companionable quiet, the clink of cutlery a comforting rhythm. Outside the window, vendors hawked yams and bread. Life resumed on the street below, oblivious to her journey. But now, she felt part of that flow rather than a captive of her home. Before leaving the house, she stood at the doorway, journal in hand. Today, she would visit the community center to enroll in classes. Each step away from this room would be another first. She felt apprehensive, yes, but also exhilarated. As she stepped outside into the bright morning, she inhaled deeply. The street's bustle greeted her, vendors shouting prices, children racing behind a ball, neighbors greeting each other with laughter. She joined their rhythm, her heart syncing with the pulse of the world beyond four walls. This was her first true night outside, and she had emerged ready to begin again. She smiled to herself, knowing this night had definitely awoken something fundamental within her. The text appeared on her phone screen like a lifeline. "Mom, he says you abandoned us, but we know the truth." Her fingers hovered above the keys before trembling. It was early afternoon, and she was waiting at the community center entrance. The words glowed softly against the worn surface of the plastic case, each letter a tether to her heart. She sank onto a nearby bench, the late morning sun warming her back. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away, fingers shaking as she opened a new reply. "My loves," she typed slowly, "I would never abandon you. Everything I'm doing now is for us." She hesitated before sending, thoughts racing. Will they understand? Will they forgive? A reply arrived instantly. "We know. We love you, Mom. Come home when you're ready." Her breath caught. A warmth spread through her chest, banishing the cold uncertainty that had plagued her since her departure. For the first time, her children's compassion felt like a healing balm. She read their words again, marveling at the mature kindness in such young hearts. Her daughter, 9, had learned to navigate the lies he told to protect him, and her son, 12, had braced himself against her husband's version of events. Yet they had chosen her. That choice shone brighter than any darkness he had cast. A voice called her name. She looked up to see Ada approaching with a clipboard and a bright smile. "Ready to register?" Ada asked, extending a pen. She nodded, folding the phone into her pocket as she stood. But her mind lingered on the text messages in the quiet space within her chest. They walked into the registration office, sunlight filtering through tall windows. The center staff welcomed them, walking them through class schedules and fee structures. She felt the weight of her commitments settle gently around her, responsibility infused with hope, not dread. Between forms and signatures, she peeked at her phone and saw another message, a heart emoji from her daughter. She smiled, a small radiance amid the paperwork. She typed a quick reply. "Can't wait to hug you both." After completing registration, she and Ada walked out into a courtyard filled with flowers and benches. Birds flitted among trees, calling to one another. She rocked onto her heels and dialed her daughter's number. It rang once, twice. Then her daughter's clear voice. "Mom." It was a joy that rose in her throat. In a soft voice, she said, "Hello, my loves. I'm okay." She listened as her children prattled assurances and asked questions about the classes she would take. Each word they spoke grounded her. She pressed the phone to her chest, feeling their presence in every beat. They agreed to meet that evening at Ada's house for dinner. The promise of their reunion filled her with anticipation. She slipped the phone into her pocket and inhaled deeply, smelling jasmine from a nearby planter. Ada watched her with gentle curiosity. "Everything all right?" she asked. She nodded, eyes bright. "They miss me. They support me." Relief spilled into her voice. Ada placed a hand on her shoulder. "They're lucky to have you." As they parted ways, she walked the short path back to the borrowed couch with purpose. Each step resonated with new resolve. Her children's choice had given her permission to heal. She would rebuild not just for herself, but for them. Later that evening, she would hold her children tight, knowing that in the darkest moments, love could always find its way back home. Their love was her strength. Her first day at the women's shelter began before dawn. She dressed in simple slacks and a clean blouse, her uniform of hope, then left her cousin's home in gentle darkness. The streets were quiet, save for the stray dog trotting ahead. She walked with purpose, each footstep promising a new chapter. At the shelter's heavy front doors, she paused and took a deep breath. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A receptionist, soft-spoken and kind, handed her a name tag. Adana Okeke, volunteer supervisor. The weight of letters on plastic felt like both celebration and responsibility. She smiled, her heart fluttering with nerves. Her supervisor, Mrs. Bello, led her through the narrow corridors. "Here, we provide safety and support to women escaping violence," she explained. Voices drifted from rooms, a child's quiet sob, a woman humming to herself. Adana swallowed hard, aware that each person here carried a story as heavy as her own. Mrs. Bello introduced her to the team, a counselor with gentle eyes, a driver who wore an ever-present grin, and 2 volunteers new like her. They gathered in a small office lined with pamphlets and coffee-stained mugs. "We start with basic needs, food, clothing, legal aid," Mrs. Bello said, handing Adana a folder of case files. "You'll oversee intake and coordinate support." Adana nodded, fingers brushing the papers with reverence. Her first client arrived, Neka, trembling and withdrawn, clutching a threadbare shawl. Adana knelt to meet her eyes. "I'm here to listen," she said softly. Neka's tears came without warning. Adana offered tissues and water, holding space for grief. She guided Neka to a private room, offering reassurance. "You're not alone anymore." In that moment, Adana realized her pain had gifted her empathy. Mid-morning, she organized donated clothes in the storeroom. Each garment held a story: bright Ankara skirts, worn sandals, a raincoat with missing buttons. She sorted by size and season, mindful that every piece could restore dignity. A volunteer knocked and asked for help comforting a woman who refused to eat. Adana followed, finding a gaunt figure on a cot, eyes distant. She sat and shared a simple meal, rice and stew, coaxing small bites with gentle encouragement. Over lunch, she joined the staff in a cramped break room. They laughed over shared frustrations, bureaucracy, funding shortfalls, lost paperwork. Adana added her own story, how she once had a home that confined her spirit. They listened, nodding, and offered solidarity. She felt understood in a way she never had before. In the afternoon, she drafted a schedule of workshops, resume writing, self-defense, children's art therapy. She arranged meeting rooms, ordered snacks, and printed flyers. Each task built a bridge between desperation and possibility. As evening approached, she conducted a support group for 5 women, including Neka, who now spoke in halting but determined sentences. Adana guided the discussion, her voice strong and steady. Before leaving, she walked the shelter grounds, a small courtyard with a flowering hibiscus bush. Under the deepening sky, she whispered a thank you to the universe. This job was hard, heart-wrenching at times, but it was hers. She had traded silent suffering for active service, turning pain into purpose. Walking home, past shuttered shops and lamplight reflections on wet pavement, she felt buoyed by the day's work. She had helped another woman glimpse possibility. In doing so, she glimpsed it for herself. The shelter's sign, safety, support, strength, etched itself into her soul. She vowed to return tomorrow, and every day after, forging her new life, one act of kindness at a time. The tiny pink door of room 3B marked the threshold of her sanctuary. Rent was modest, barely half her settlement money, and the landlord's no-questions policy felt liberating. Inside, the room was scarcely larger than her bed, a single mattress on a low frame, a wooden chair, and a rickety desk. A lone window overlooked the neighbor's laundry lines. Yet despite its austerity, the room exuded calm. She moved in on a humid afternoon, carrying only essentials: the green coat her co-worker had given, a stack of journals, and her favorite mug. She arranged the bed with crisp white sheets, smoothing each crease as if ironing out past regrets. Then she placed a small potted fern on the windowsill, a gesture of optimism amid concrete walls. In the shared kitchen down the hall, she met Mrs. Kalu, a retired teacher who rented room 3A. Mrs. Kalu hummed a hymn as she stirred a pot of stew, offering Adana a bowl. Between spoons, they exchanged life stories: Mrs. Kalu's widowed years, Adana's flight from her home. They laughed over seasoning mistakes and commiserated when the burner sputtered. The communal space, once intimidating, became a tapestry of companionship. Evenings in her room were rituals of tranquility. She lit a small lantern with soothing vanilla aroma and sank into the chair, pen in hand. Journal pages filled with reflections, gratitude for hardship's lessons, goals for the day. Lines of poetry sprung from newfound freedom. The fern's fronds brushed against her arm, a delicate reassurance that growth could flourish in the smallest plot. She cooked simple meals by the window: rice and beans, plantain and egg, steaming hot and seasoned with hope. The city hum faded behind closed curtains. Instead, she listened to cicadas and distant horns. In the hush, she felt attuned to her heartbeat, loud and rhythmic, proof of life's persistence. On weekends, she hosted movie nights in the kitchen. 3 roommates huddled around a small DVD player. They watched old comedies, sharing laughter that rolled like waves through the hallway. For the first time, she experienced company untainted by obligation, friends who celebrated her presence rather than questioned her worth. One morning, she discovered she'd forgotten to pay rent. Panic fluttered in her chest until she recalled her settlement check scheduled to clear the following day. She crossed her arms and recited a silent mantra: "This is enough." The next day, the landlord accepted her payment with a curt nod and no more demands. The borrowed grace felt like divine permission to exist on her own terms. Neighbors dropped by, a young student seeking light for her desk lamp, a nurse inquiring borrowing sugar, a tailor offering to mend her coat. Each interaction, though small, filled the room with warmth. She collected invitations to share meals or attend community talks, weaving herself into the neighborhood's fabric. At month's end, she counted her savings and realized she had enough for next month's rent and a small treat, a new notebook. She bought it from a stationery stall, feeling victorious at the sight of blank pages waiting for her story. Each morning she awoke under a fresh sheet of responsibility. Each evening she slipped between tidy covers under a quilt of accomplishment. The room's walls, once bare and unwelcoming, now felt protective, cradling her dreams and victories. In that modest space, she discovered the expansive truth. Peace is not measured by square footage, but by the freedom to breathe, think, and grow. Here, in her small room, she had found big peace. Her shoes had once been polished leather loafers, sturdy, reliable, fashionable. Now the soles curled upward, exposing seams that spit dirt as she walked. The heels were threadbare, threads curling like forgotten ribbons. Each morning, she inspected them before dressing, wincing but refusing to buy new ones. Saving every naira mattered more than appearances. After work at the shelter, she walked home through bustling markets, careful around puddles to keep her feet dry. Once, she slipped in a muddy pothole, splattering her ankles. Passers-by gave sympathetic glances, but no help. She stood, dusted herself off, and continued. The city floor was rocky, just like her journey. Her cousin Ada noticed one afternoon. "Your shoes, are they okay?" she asked, hovering over Adana's trembling feet. Adana shrugged. "They still hold together." Ada frowned. "Let me give you mine." Reluctance curled around Adana's pride, but Ada insisted, handing over a pair of sturdy sneakers with a bright yellow trim. "Use them until you can get new ones." Adana accepted, gratitude and guilt warring within her. That evening, she wore the sneakers to the shelter. Colleagues admired their bright color, asking where she got them. She said simply, "A friend." Each time she said it, she felt warmth blooming, a reminder that kindness need not be explained. But at home, she returned Ada's sneakers. They were ill-fitting, gave her blisters. She slipped back into the worn loafers with a sigh. "Better the devil you know," she muttered, rubbing her heels. Ada's patience had its limits. One day she would earn enough for proper shoes. She clipped coupons from newspapers and combed online marketplaces for sales. She tucked savings into an envelope labeled Shoes Fund, placing it on her desk next to the fern. Each week, a few hundred naira from her part-time tutoring gig joined the pile. Watching the envelope bulge offered secret delight. At the market, she tried on a sensible pair of flats, navy blue with a modest heel. They fit perfectly, but cost nearly double her savings. She declined, pressing a polite, "Maybe next time." Her wallet went back into her purse, lighter but her resolve intact. Meanwhile, her old loafers continued carrying her to the center, to volunteer sessions, to her small room's respite. Though tattered, they bore witness to her determination. One afternoon, as she walked a client home, she noticed a nursing student's white shoes gleaming. She smiled inwardly. One day, her shoes would shine too. Months passed, and her envelope grew heavier. At last, the day came. She counted out the exact amount and marched to the market. The flats still sat on display. She handed over the money and examined the shoes, sleek, sturdy, unmarked by hardship. She slipped them on. They felt like wings. Walking home, she tested each step. Soft cushion, firm grip. They were more than footwear. They were symbols of progress. Proof that every sacrifice, every pinched naira, had led here. That night, as she set the worn loafers aside, she whispered to them, "Thank you." They had carried her through darkness. Now, she would carry new dreams forward, one confident step at a time. It began with a child's giggle. Midweek at the shelter, Adana led an art therapy session for the youngest residents. She passed out colored pencils and paper, encouraging them to draw safe places. The small room buzzed with concentration until the overhead light flickered and went out, plunging them into semi-darkness. A hush fell. The children paused, wide-eyed. Then one little girl, no older than 6, let out a startled yelp, followed by peals of laughter. Her laughter was bright, chaotic, infectious. Soon, others joined in, giggling as they watched their own silhouettes flicker against the chalkboard. Adana felt something loosen inside her chest, tension she hadn't realized she held. She laughed too, a rush of pure, unguarded joy. The sound startled her at first, but she embraced it. The children's smiles shone like lanterns, guiding her from past darkness. After the lights returned, the room remained lighter. The children finished their drawings with renewed gusto: rainbow skies, safe houses, families holding hands. One boy presented his picture, a tall woman in green coat standing beside a shelter. "That's you," he declared proudly. Adana's heart swelled. "That's me," she confirmed, tears of happiness prickling her eyes. During lunch break, she sat in the courtyard with Mrs. Bello and other staff. They shared stories. A counselor's daughter had burned dinner. The driver's cat ate his slippers. They laughed until their sides ached. Adana realized months had passed since she'd laughed like this, freely, without the sting of shame or fear. She thought of the day she fled her home, bruised by words and loneliness. Then she pictured this moment, sunlight on her face, laughter echoing around her, belonging coursing through her veins. The contrast was as vivid as color on a child's drawing. That evening at home, she hummed an old tune as she prepared dinner. The fern on her windowsill swayed in the breeze, as if joining her melody. For the first time in years, she cooked without tension. Each chop of the knife, each stir of the pot, imbued with lightness. When Ada returned from work, she found Adana dancing in the kitchen, apron askew, laughter bubbling. "What's so funny?" she asked, amused. Adana pointed to the plant on the sill, grinning. "This little fern reminds me how life finds a way. And today I laughed, really laughed." Ada joined in, spinning between counters until they collapsed in giggles. Later, tucked into bed, Adana reflected on the day's miracle. Laughter had found her again. It was more than amusement. It was proof of healing. It affirmed that her heart, once hardened, still beat with hope. As sleep claimed her, she let that laughter echo in her mind, a chorus promising brighter tomorrows. She drifted off with a smile, knowing joy was a friend she would never again abandon. Monday morning, she arrived at the shelter to find a gleaming new coat draped over her office chair. It was tailored wool in deep burgundy, far beyond anything in her wardrobe. A note lay inside a pocket. "Stay warm," from a grateful friend. She traced the delicate stitching with awe. That afternoon, curious, she asked around. Staff denied involvement. The receptionist shrugged. "Maybe someone donated it by mistake." Adana smiled and said, "A mistake that feels like grace." Yet gratitude swelled in her chest, and a desire to know her benefactor. Days later, she encountered a tall woman in the courtyard, arms full of files. The woman paused, scanning the garden's hibiscus bush. Adana approached. "Excuse me, did you leave something here?" The woman turned, meeting her gaze. Her eyes held warmth. "You have my coat," she said. "I'm Chioma, the legal aid volunteer." Adana's heart raced. "I work here too in intake." Chioma's smile was gentle. "I noticed you wearing my coat last week. It fit perfectly." She shrugged. "I'd lost mine. Someone donated it. I was moved that you wore it so often. I had another at home." Adana's throat tightened. "Thank you," she whispered. Chioma held up a hand. "This place runs on kindness. I wanted you to feel cared for." They sat on a bench, sunlight on their shoulders. Chioma shared her story, how she'd escaped an abusive marriage and become a paralegal to help others. Adana listened, marveling at the coincidence. Two women bound by broken pasts and a shelter that mended them. In the weeks that followed, Chioma mentored her in legal paperwork, divorce petitions, protection orders, custody arrangements. They pored over statutes and case files, mid-morning sunlight filtering through blinds. Adana's competence blossomed under Chioma's guidance. She realized that help often arrived in unexpected forms: a warm coat, a listening ear, an offered hand. One rainy afternoon, Adana escorted a client to court. She wore Chioma's coat, zipped tightly against the drizzle. Inside the courtroom, she spoke with clarity and compassion, advocating for a young mother's safety. The judge commended her poise. Chioma squeezed her shoulder as they left. "You were brilliant," she praised. On the bus ride home, Adana leaned against the rainy window, feeling the coat's thick wool like a second skin. She reflected on the stranger's gift, the coat that warmed her body and led her to a mentor who stoked her confidence. Back in her small room, she draped the coat on a hook by the door, a symbol of solidarity and renewed purpose. In her journal, she wrote, "A stranger's kindness became my beacon. I will pay it forward." That night, she dreamed of that coat transforming into a cape, each seam stitched with courage. She awoke smiling, ready to extend the stranger's gift, to support another woman, stand by her side, and remind her that no one rebuilds alone. In that realization, her own journey found its fullest meaning. She pedaled home after another long shift at the shelter, the evening breeze curling through her hair as she pushed open her cousin's gate. 2 envelopes lay side by side on the doormat, one plain, the other bearing the Ministry of Labor's seal. Her pulse quickened as she stooped to pick them up. The plain envelope held a routine utility notice. The embossed one felt unexpectedly weighty. With trembling fingers, she slid out the folded paper inside. A check, crisp and official, gleamed back at her under the porch light. She carried it up the narrow stairs to her tiny room, walls plastered with children's drawings and hopeful quotes. Sitting at her desk, she carefully unfolded the check and held it to the single lamp's glow. The sum printed there was modest by many standards, but it represented so much more than money. It was overdue back pay from a brief part-time job she'd nearly forgotten. Tightness bloomed in her chest, relief mixed with disbelief. She pressed the paper against her heart, as though its fibers could merge with her own. Dawn found her at the local bank, deposit slip in hand and determination in her step. The teller recognized her name and nodded before processing the transaction. The stamp slamming onto the deposit slip felt like applause echoing inside her bones. Exiting into the cool morning air, she imagined every naira inside her account humming with potential. The world looked different, lighter, quieter, as if acknowledging her quiet victory. Back at Ada's kitchen, she placed the deposit confirmation atop the breakfast plates. Ada stared at the slip, then at her face. "You did it," her cousin whispered, voice thick with pride. Adana nodded, tears threatening as she scooped warm porridge into a bowl. "It's real," she said softly, spoon trembling. They ate in companionable silence, the weight of the check settling into promise. That afternoon, she retrieved her worn budget notebook and recorded the new balance with careful precision. Under rent, she penciled an exact amount. Under groceries, the next week's estimate. At the bottom of the page, she wrote one bold line. "Dreams, art therapy certification paid." The words felt surreal yet empowering. She closed the book, running her fingers over the cover as if sealing a pact. That night, she lay in bed clutching the check's carbon copy, heart still humming. She no longer feared empty pockets or shut doors. Tomorrow, she would register for evening classes, and the next day, she would begin a new chapter defined not by survival, but by growth. The check in the mail had done more than fill an account. It had ignited her belief in herself. The first time she lit her new stove, she felt a thrill unlike any before. 2 months of careful saving had finally bought her a simple gas stove, modern, reliable, and all hers. She unpacked it in her small kitchen, marveling at its clean lines. When she turned the knob and heard the whoosh of flame, her heart warmed beyond the hearth's glow. She cooked rice and beans that evening, the pot's metal sides humming under the even heat. Steam curled up in lazy spirals as she stirred, inhaling the scent of cinnamon she'd added on impulse. Each bubble felt like a promise kept. For years, her old burner sputtered and stalled. Now, she felt in control of her life with every flick of the knob. Word spread among the shelter staff, and one day Mrs. Bello stopped by, eyes lighting up at the sight. "You did this yourself?" she asked, voice brimming with admiration. Adana smiled, opening the cabinet to reveal neat rows of plates and spices. "It's a small thing," she said, "but it means everything." Mrs. Bello nodded, her own memories of hardship echoing in empathetic silence. That weekend, she invited 2 women from the shelter, Neka and Ife, to a small dinner. She set the table with mismatched dishes, lit candles she'd bought with leftover funds, and served their favorite jollof rice. As they ate, laughter bubbled around the stove's warmth. Nneka described how, in her old home, she'd gone hungry for days. Ife spoke of cooking on open fires in rainy weather. Adana listened, heart swelling with purpose. In the days that followed, she taught a cooking workshop at the shelter, showing survivors how to manage resources and prepare nutritious meals. She demonstrated her stove, encouraging each woman to take turns lighting it safely. Their tentative smiles grew wider with each successful ignition. She realized then that this stove was more than an appliance. It was a tool for empowerment. One rainy afternoon, she stood by the window, rain tapping against the glass in gentle rhythms. On the stove, a pot of stew simmered, filling the room with warmth and spices. She closed her eyes, letting the scent and sound cradle her. In that small kitchen, she had found a metaphor for her own transformation. Steady heat, careful tending, nourishment for the soul. As dusk fell, she turned off the stove and cleaned the pot with sudsy water. The tiles gleamed under the overhead bulb, a quiet testament to progress. She hung a dishcloth on the rack, smiling to herself. Tomorrow, she would return to the community center, more confident than ever. The stove that worked had reignited more than steam. It had rekindled her sense of home. Her phone vibrated on the table at work, the screen flashing his number. For months, she had deleted his voicemails unheard. Now, curiosity nudged her to press answer. Adana. His voice was tentative, unfamiliar. I didn't realize how much you did. The house is a mess without you. She closed her eyes, absorbing the awkward apology. She met Mrs. Bello in the hallway and excused herself, stepping into the quiet courtyard. Why are you calling? She asked, voice steady despite her racing heart. He sighed. I miss the calm. The kids miss you. I was wrong. The admission felt strange in his usual harsh tone. She leaned against a flowering hibiscus bush, branches brushing her shoulder. And what do you want? She asked, crossing her arms. He swallowed hard. I just wanted closure. To say I'm sorry. Silence stretched between them like an unwelcome guest. She remembered the nights of belittling laughter, the mornings of cold shoulders. Compassion stirred, then retreated. Thank you for saying that, she replied, carefully neutral. He hesitated. Would you come by? Her mind ping-ponged between old wounds and new strengths. No, she said finally. I don't belong there anymore. His voice cracked. I understand. The line went dead before she could second-guess herself. Leaving the courtyard, she felt the sun warm her back. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from her daughter. Mom, we love you. She smiled, the simple truth more powerful than any apology. At home that evening, she texted him once. I forgive you. Goodbye. She pressed send and deleted his contact, heart lighter than it had been in years. News of his new companion reached her by chance, a neighbor's hushed gossip over the fence. He's moved on already, the neighbor said. Said the other woman was more understanding. Adana paused, watering her fern. Understanding? She thought, smirking. I had boundaries. That evening, he called again. She left, he confessed, voice tinged with bitterness. Too demanding. She listened, unmoved. She had boundaries, she said quietly. He let out a bitter laugh. I suppose. The silence that followed felt neither cold nor warm, just final. Adana leaned against her kitchen counter and stared at the simmering stew she'd prepared. She let the steam rise around her like a shield. She remembered how she had once sought his approval. Now she felt only empathy, for both him and the woman he'd discarded. Boundaries, she repeated in her mind. Respect. The next day at work, she watched the sunrise with Chioma, who sensed her quiet triumph. He's learning what you always knew, Chioma said. Adana nodded, sipping her tea. Boundaries aren't just walls, she replied. They're the space where you grow. That afternoon, a new client arrived, a woman escaping a controlling partner. Adana guided her to a small office and gently explained. Boundaries are your right. Never apologize for them. The woman's tears of relief mirrored Adana's own journey. In that moment, She realized her past had become her greatest lesson. He called one evening. This time his voice was hollow. "I'm lonely," he said. "The house is too big. The kids barely visit." Adana listened, her heart fluttering with unexpected compassion. "Maybe it's because you made it unlivable," she replied softly. She pictured his empty halls, laughter replaced by echoing regrets. She could have offered comfort, once she craved it, but now she understood that some wounds required accountability, not solace. "I hope you find peace," she said, and ended the call. That night, she dreamed of his shame as a heavy cloak dragging him through dark corridors. In her dream, she offered him a lantern. He reached for it, only to find it cold. She woke with a start, grateful the burden was no longer hers to bear. In the days that followed, she hosted a family dinner at Ada's house. The children ran around the yard, laughter weaving through the twilight. She sat among them, the world warmed by shared stories and full plates. No shadows of shame hovered here, only acceptance and love. As she tucked her daughter into bed later, the child pressed a handwritten note into her hand. "You are my light." Adana kissed her forehead, tears of joy glinting in the lamplight. She placed the note on her bedside table and drifted to sleep, heart unburdened. In the quiet of dawn, she reflected on the man who once controlled her world. His shame was his alone, hers had become wisdom, and as the sun rose, she felt fully at home in the life she had built, free, valued, and finally at peace. She stared at the email subject line, "Can we talk?" with a racing heart. Against her instincts, she opened the message. "Meet me tomorrow at our home at 5 p.m. I owe you a proper conversation." Memories flickered of early days, laughter at dawn, shy kisses. Then the harsh words and cold silences returned. She set aside her phone and paced until frustration eased. By morning, she confided in Chioma at the shelter. Over steaming tea, she described the invitation and her conflict. "Closure matters," Chioma advised gently. "You decide how this ends." Buoyed by that counsel, Adana composed her reply. "I will meet you at 5 tomorrow. We speak as equals." She sent it and felt both fear and power. That evening, she prepared her outfit, a modest dress signaling calm resolve. She filled her notebook with points she intended to cover, unacknowledged efforts, boundaries, her own worth. When the children stirred at daybreak, she hugged them, whispering reassurance. "I have an important meeting, but I'll return tonight." Their trusting smiles anchored her courage. As 5 o'clock neared, she stood before the gate of her former house, hand steady. When he opened the door, she looked past his surprised expression and stepped inside not as a supplicant, but as a woman claiming respect. The room that once echoed contempt now awaited her voice. She opened her notebook to her first point. "You dismissed my contributions." She spoke clearly, each word deliberate. He listened, brow furrowing. She continued, "I am no longer invisible." With each sentence, walls crumbled. This invite was her moment, a choice to confront, to heal, and to reclaim her narrative. Her voice rang true, and she knew whatever came next, she had already won. The front door closed softly behind her. He gestured to a chair by the window. Afternoon light warmed the room. She sat upright, spine straight, notebook open on her lap. He cleared his throat. I'm sorry." The words were small, unfamiliar. She inhaled, fingertips resting on the page where she'd penned her first point. "Thank you for apologizing," she said evenly. "But I need more than words." He swallowed and shifted. "I didn't appreciate how hard you worked. I took you for granted." She nodded, voice steady. Acknowledgement was missing for years. "I managed our home, cared for our children, balanced finances. You never saw any of it." His eyes softened, regret flickered. He leaned forward, shame evident. "I see now. I was selfish." She turned the page. "I also need respect for my decisions and space for my growth." He looked down and rubbed his forehead. "I want to support you. I miss our partnership." She closed her notebook gently. Partnership is mutual. Actions speak louder than promises. A pause. He set aside his phone and stood. "Tell me what I can do." She met his gaze calmly. Give me time, and let me lead in my own choices. He nodded. Anytime, anything. She rose and walked to the doorway. Thank you for listening. This means more than you know. Behind her, he exhaled slowly. She stepped into the sunlight, notebook clasped to her chest. The conversation had opened a new door, one she would walk through on her own terms. Adana stood in the doorway of her new two-bedroom flat and inhaled deeply. Freshly painted walls gleamed in soft daylight. She had chosen a pale teal for the bedroom and warm cream for the living area, colors that spoke of calm mornings and hopeful afternoons. She carried a box of kitchen utensils inside and set it on the marble countertop, listening to the echo, her echo, returning in an empty space. As she unpacked dishes and arranged them meticulously on open shelves, she sensed the emptiness fill with possibility. She placed a framed photo of her children on the windowsill. Sunlight caught their smiling faces. In the corner stood her sturdy desk, notebook and favorite pens waiting. She placed her fern beside the sink, where its fronds would catch every ray. Later, she assembled the mattress and spread crisp sheets, tucking each corner with care. In the living room, she unfolded her modest sofa and added colorful cushions. She draped a soft throw across the armrest. In the hallway, she nailed hooks for coats and bags, each anchored firmly, a symbol of her newfound independence. That evening, she lit a single candle on the dining table, its flame dancing in the gentle breeze from the open window. She sat and sipped tea from her favorite mug, savoring the warmth and the view, rooftops and distant acacia trees. No shouting, no judgment, only her own heartbeat as soundtrack. She ran her fingers over the smooth walls and whispered, "Welcome home." In that moment, her heart swelled with pride. This space was more than four walls and a roof. It was a canvas for her life, painted with perseverance and quiet joy. She stirred the pot gently and inhaled the fragrant aroma of jollof rice blended with peppers and spices. Tonight, her children and Ada would join her in the new flat for their first official family dinner. The dining table was set with mismatched plates collected over weeks, each one a memory of the journey. She ladled rice onto each plate, added grilled fish and fresh salad, then arranged sliced pineapple for dessert. Just before they arrived, she switched on soft music and dimmed the lights to a warm glow. A knock sounded at the door. She opened it to reveal her daughter, clutching her brother's hand, eyes shining. Ada followed, carrying a fresh loaf of bread. They settled around the table, smiling at one another. Her daughter grinned and said, "It smells amazing." Her son nodded enthusiastically. "It's perfect." Ada raised her glass of juice. To Adana's new chapter. They clinked glasses. Conversation flowed easily. School stories, dreams of art classes, neighbor gossip. Laughter echoed through the flat, weaving around the walls. When her son recounted a joke, everyone laughed until tears formed. Her daughter reached across and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you, Mama." Adana's eyes filled. They passed bread and refilled plates without prompt. The meal felt like communion, each bite seasoned with love. After clearing dishes together, they moved to the couch for mango smoothies. Under the soft overhead lamp, they shared hopes, travel plans, weekend outings, new recipes to try. Night deepened outside, but inside there was warmth, comfort, and belonging. For the first time in years, she felt truly home, surrounded by those she loved, nourished by their shared presence, and secure in the life she had built. She sat on her porch with a cup of herbal tea, the night breeze rustling the curtains. In her hand, she held a folded note her daughter had slipped into her purse that morning. "You're our hero." The words glowed like lanterns in the dark. She closed her eyes and inhaled the jasmine-scented air. He had chased her from that house, but she had gained something immeasurable: freedom, dignity, and self-love. She reflected on every step of her journey, the outburst that freed her voice, the sheltered job that healed her heart, the small room that taught her peace, the worn shoes that carried her forward, the check in the mail that affirmed her worth. Her children's choice to stand by her had been the greatest gift. In the distance, a lone street lamp cast soft light on the garden. She imagined planting flowers there someday, Tomorrow, she would begin art therapy classes, using color to translate her story. She took a sip of tea and savored its warmth. She felt tired, yet utterly alive. The house behind her was no longer a prison, but a memory she carried as a lesson. She pressed the note to her chest, its paper crinkling like a heartbeat. She whispered into the night, "He chased me out, and I found my life." Stars winked overhead, as though affirming her declaration. She set the cup aside, stood, and turned inside. Peace was hers at last, found not in walls, but in the strength of a woman who refused to be invisible. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like, comment, and share. Also turn on the bell to get more of our videos. See you in the next story.